Hey guys, I figured I would go live because I want to read from my Kindle app, which is on my phone. So, anyways, I figured I would just go live, and I really wanted to read this chapter out loud for everyone else. This is from David Mackler's book called Breaking from Your Parents, and it's chapter 6, and it's on forgiveness. So he says, I often find it difficult to discuss breaking up with parents without someone bringing up the subject of forgiveness. Personally, I don't find the two subjects inherently related. But in society like ours that puts so much pressure on children to forgive their parents, somehow the two have become blended, like a drink concoction of fruit and poison. But why is my point of view so strong on this subject? My main personal reason is that the pressure to forgive has been repeatedly used as a weapon against me by my parents, my grandparents, by other parents, by friends who are parents, by non parent adults wedded to their parents, by religion, by most psychology books, by many therapists, by school, and by television. The list could go on and on. The conventional point of view is hard to escape. Our society considers forgiveness to be healthy and considers not forgiving to be a sort of sin, something to be ashamed of or hide or get over. So many supposedly great leaders and gurus say things like forgiveness is the root of healing. You cannot heal or be happy until you begin forgiving. And the crowd swoons and chants, and people feel blissfully happy on the surface. And those of us living in a deeper realm of consciousness feel more alone than ever. I find it important to start by defining forgiveness. The dictionary defines forgiveness as the act of excusing a mistake or offense. In the context of parental abuse and breaking away from parents, I prefer to call forgiveness by its real name, disassociation. Dissociation. I define dissociation as the act of denying the horror you experience, burying your authentic self, sacrificing your well deserved rage and pain, curtailing your grieving process, closing your eyes to reality, putting your head in the sand, pretending everything's just fine, taking the side of the perpetrator, going numb, and squelching all urges to heal. In all my experience, when people say they forgive their parents, they're dissociating. They give up on their true selves. But for the sake of argument, could it ever be healthy to forgive one's parents if, let's say, one's parents have really taken full responsibility for their actions, healed their own inner childhood wounds that caused them to commit their errors, and devoted their lives to stopping such offenses? My answer is no. I still find the idea of forgiveness irrelevant because nothing excuses the horrors of the past. There is no excuse. Yes, there is understanding. Yes, there can be healing. And yes, perhaps certain degrees of respectful reconnection can potentially become possible, assuming that the child had also healed these wounds. But I never seen parents do this level of healing. In fact, not even close. And he just goes on to talk about how it's hard for parents to really go into this healing. He said most, even the healthiest, simply have little clue what damage they have done, and like a weak filament in a light bulb burn out. If someone explains it to them, it's just too painful, too overwhelming, too sad, too contrary to their consciousness. Yet sometimes parents, to their credit, do understand certain aspects of what they have done, but not the whole picture. Just for a little background, Daniel Mackler, well, he isn't a parent, um, and he firmly believes that people should not have kids unless they have become healthy and healed their own traumas. Something to that effect. But to backtrack a little, there is a good reason so many people strive to forgive their parents when they were children Not forgiving their parents, that is, not dissociating from parental abuse, had serious emotional consequences. Children who do not dissociate actually have to feel their appropriate responses to that which was done to them. They feel sorrow, dash hopes, their misery, their dashed hopes, their misery, their upwelling grief, their rage, their sickening fury, their desire to kill, desire to cry, their desire for justice, and their burning desire to be heard. And if they feel these things, their parents will in some way banish them from the family system. This highlights the value in dissociating. It provides a lifeline for the abused child to stay connected to his abusive parents. And this is a profound template for living, for surviving. Most never break from it, and even after their parents are dead. This template also provides perks outside of the family system. If you are an adult who seems to have forgiven, you are allowed to join the cult of other adults who seem to have forgiven, the conventional cult of doublespeak known as maturity. One second. It is comforting to join a whole world of people who embrace you for being like them. It is pleasurable. It makes social life smooth and certainly easier, unless, of course, you feel that desperate urge to get real at all costs. Then you will realize that no matter how supposedly forgiving are the people you once called your fellows, you are a homeless outsider. Your insight into the truth makes you a reject. It is a sad irony that is considered an unforgivable sin amongst those who worship false forgiveness for you to refuse to forgive your parents. You are the gust of north wind that topples their house of cards. Meanwhile, how I wonder, can it be possible for us to let people off the hook for crushing us when we've never even had the chance to heal from our damage? Actually, I'm reading something, sorry. I mean, nobody's on here anyways. Oh, one person. Hey. So let's see here. Nevertheless, our species has attempted to build a society around excusing parental perpetrators, yet so few see how insane this is. What we need to do instead is to grow and heal and process our wounds. Parental pain be damned. Or to put it more gently, our parents' pain is not our concern, right? Our parents' pain is not our concern. I like that. It's really not. But the narcissistic parent will surely make you believe that you have done them wrong. Oh, goodness gracious. We can't excuse anyone and shouldn't try. Instead, we need to study ourselves, learn what was done to us, right? grieve our wounds, and perhaps at some point, if it causes us no harm and enhances our growth, even explore the histories of those who damaged us to discover their motivations. But attempting to excuse them only sends us in the wrong direction, right? How many of us do that? That's what we have, always tried to do. Like, they did the best they could for what they had. They did the best they could for where they were at in life. Right, right, right. But the thing is that when a person continues to be a perpetrator and continues to harm you and then claim that you're harming them, you know, that's another thing. You know what I'm saying? It would be one thing if your parent was a certain way when you were growing up and then they do not continue to harm you the way they always have. Hold on a second. Somebody was texting me. It's funny because it would be funny if this situation is my thing, because I tell you what, I've always had conflict in this area of my life. It's always been a conflict for me, this thing with this mother of mine. Maybe it can be turned around and used for good. Let's see here. I mean, I ain't gonna lie, reading Daniel Mackler, if you're a parent, will make you question yourself as a parent too. Like, you'll be looking at yourself. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to be an abusive parent. Like, because I know I get triggered sometimes and I yell and things like that. And I have to apologize and I have to look at myself and see what the hell I'm doing. And it is, I mean, shit. Having children without, like doing anything to harm them and not even intentionally, you know what I mean? Just like he's talking about, just like things that just come out of your own traumas or like your triggers, like you have to like correct, Okay, so as an analogy, should the victim of brutal rape forgive her rapist in order to heal? This idea is ludicrous to anyone who knows about processing trauma, yet a parallel form of this dynamic is exactly what average parents demand of average children in average families. But are there cases in which it is psychologically appropriate for an adult child to excuse his parents for their errors? Many people, of course, would say, but my parents were not brutal rapists, right? I'm like, hey, like that's kind of like they weren't that bad. They were nice, loving people. Okay, maybe they didn't buy me the blue mongoose bicycle I wanted for Christmas when I was 12, but they didn't crush my soul. Or did they, I ask? The more I study perfectly normal people's childhoods, the more I argue that they most certainly did crush your soul. That is, crush the essence of yourself and your truth and your passion as a person. I think that that definitely happened to me. Most people block out their crushing history. They don't remember splitting off their terror at 1, crying themselves to sleep at 2, swallowing their rage at 3, dousing the flames of their longing at 4, and quelling their rebellion at 5. They have buried their pain and blotted out their memory. That makes it easy to trivialize the subject of forgiveness as something out there and unrelated to me and not remotely analogous to my relationship with my parents. I have an example from my own life. As a child, I became an expert at forgiveness. No matter what my parents did to me, I was, to use their words, gifted at turning the other cheek, being the bigger person, and being mature about things. I was even proud of myself for this. I felt I had incredible self control, yet it wasn't until I went into my chronological adulthood that I discovered I had only mastered the art of selling myself out. I was an expert dissociator. Without a self to be connected to, I of course found it easy to forgive. After all, I felt none of the pain they inflicted on me. Yet in the shadows of my personality, hidden behind my poised facade, and disconnected from my consciousness, there lived an abandoned, terrified little child, cowering in fear of more rejection. And he felt everything, but simply wasn't consciously aware of it. Here I think of 20-year-old Vanessa, a young woman I have known for years who recently had a major psychological breakdown. I remember her as a little girl, sparkling emotionally, connected, and socially gifted. Then, when she was 6, her hippie parents gave up their New York City apartment, uprooted her from her life, and took her with them to Ecuador to live in a commune. This devastated her. When they returned to New York 6 years later, she was broken. She had dissociated from her feelings and lost the passion in her eyes. She simmered with a repressed anger that occasionally resurfaced in meanness and bullying toward littler children, which was a replication of what her parents had done to her. Just once she admitted to me how much she resented her parents for ripping her out of her life, and in the moment I felt the old fiery eyed Vanessa. But the rest of the time she said she forgave them. She couldn't tolerate breaking her dissociation, and by her mid teens, she got high on marijuana every day and not infrequently on painkillers to keep her feelings at bay. But that didn't work, and eventually her feelings found their way out through the lens of psychosis. At one point, she beat up her mother, accusing her of stealing one of the hemispheres of her brain, which I considered a rather apt metaphor for her historical reality. Now I hear that Vanessa is back living with her parents and taking antipsychotics. She is a shell of what she once was, and as a side effect of her pills, has put on 60 pounds. That was something that concerned me, as I had to move and like uproot my kids from where we were, and that was I still cry about it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and just, yeah, it's crazy. But I don't know. This is an interesting story because it's like, well, I guess maybe she felt like her parents didn't take her into consideration when leaving to Ecuador to this commune or whatever. But what do you do when, your kids do have a nice setup where they're at and you have to move or leave? How do you do that in a gentle manner as to not traumatize your kids or steal the life from them, you know? This story is extreme but typical. They abused her. She dissociated from it and labeled it forgiveness because she needed her relationship with them. Then she did drugs to shore up her dissociation. Eventually, her wounded inner child, in a desperate attempt to save her soul, burst through her dissociation in a swell of madness and got her labeled as a problem and got her placed on heavier, more dangerous drugs to bury her feelings. Meanwhile, I don't mean to say it was right for her to beat up her mother because I see that as an expression of unprocessed and acted outrage, but I do see her parents' crimes toward her as far more serious and devastating than anything she did to them. As an alternate story, I will now let a friend of mine, Jonathan, speak for me. Jonathan is in his 60s. He spent decades out of contact with his parents because of their cruelty toward him when he was a child. He spent those decades studying himself, exploring the ways in which he replicated the unhealthy things they did to him, working to break his dissociation and to integrate his authentic self. Recently, Jonathan's father died, and Jonathan returned home to the funeral. There, he reconnected with his 93-year-old mother, whom he had labeled a barbarian for her treatment of him. She had regularly psychologically and physically tormented him when he was little. Yet, since the funeral, he has been talking on the phone with her a couple of times a week, which he said to his surprise he mostly enjoys. This confused me. Does this mean that you forgive your mother? I asked, curious how he would respond. You know, he replied, I hate the word forgiveness. It's so misused in our culture, and for that reason, I don't really use it. When people say forgive, they really mean forget, or even more so, deny. I have not forgotten what she did to me. I don't deny how it wounded me. I know full well how cruel she was and how it warped my life. Yet you talk on the phone with her, I countered. Often? Well, Jonathan said, for years I didn't see her, and now that she's 93, I lost my fear that she could harm me. And I don't talk with her for her sake, I do it for mine. To be honest, I'm fascinated with her. For decades, I avoided this barbarian, and now that I do speak with her, I've come to realize how strong I've become. For so many years, I was scared of her, thinking she could destroy me with one of her comments. But all that time I was away from her, I was growing, and she was growing weaker to me. Now she's harmless, just a little old lady, and now that I find her harmless, I can satisfy my curiosity about her and realize I have a lot. She's a person from a different world, and yet she was the most important person in my world during the most vulnerable years of my life. She grew up with an outhouse for a toilet, and she had her Christmas presents delivered by a horse sled. Her parents punished her by hitting her legs with a willow switch. I also think she was molested, but she's never admitted it to me directly. But for all those years I was away, I never got the chance to know the story of her childhood and to find out what created her character and motivated her to treat me the way that she did. So now I'm taking my opportunity. Excuse me. So you're not letting her off the hook for what she did? Oh no, replied Jonathan, not at all. She passed all that damage on to me, and she is accountable and always will be. I'm fascinated by the person who created me and raised me and hurt me so much. She's the primary material of my life. But to get back to the word forgiveness, I asked, do you feel you forgive her? No, he replied quietly, shaking his head. No, I don't. I don't forgive her for what she did to me, and I don't forgive my father either. I don't see forgiveness as the point. That word has lost meaning to me. And that's how that chapter ends, which is, I don't know. Kind of gave me a headache in a way. Chapter 7 is romantic relationships. And the first line is romantic relationships make an excellent place to reenact our unresolved childhood dynamics with our parents. All right, I'm going to log off. I don't know if I got much from that chapter, but think that just finally realizing that it is okay to break away from your parents, it is okay to never speak to them again. It is okay. And I think that I had mentioned in another video that for some reason my whole life I just wanted nothing more to get away from mine. Um, I thought, oh, when I go to college, I'll dorm. And then an uncle of mine who I feel like enabled my mother's behavior too. Like nobody called her out on her shit, you know? Everybody was just like, oh, she's just a perfectionist. Like, no. So I thought, well, this is my chance. And then he was like, no, just stay, you know, because obviously dorming is very expensive and stuff. So I just stayed. But the second that I graduated college, I immediately got a job and I immediately moved out. And then I had to go back at one point. It was like after I had my encounter with God and everything. And I thought, oh, some things had occurred where I didn't lose my job. Well, I kind of lost my job because I was working for an agency called Seed Corp, and then they had given their company to another agency, and I kind of got fired from them in a way. I think I got unemployment though for a bit. Well, anyways, then I had to move from where I was. I forget how it exactly happened, but for whatever reason, I ended up back at my mother's for a little bit, and I was like, well, maybe I'm supposed to be back here. Maybe this is a God thing. Like, so I could, because I was saved at this point. I was, I'm a Christian, born again. And I was like, well, I can, maybe I have to like forgive her and like deal with her, like learn how to have a relationship with this like difficult ass person. And yeah, it didn't, I mean, it was fine being there. But it was still like, then after that I eloped. So anyways, I guess I thought I was supposed to go there to do, some type of healing, but I don't think that was really the case because that really didn't happen. Yeah, my sentiments are that I would probably be happy never seeing her ever again. And I feel pretty good about saying that. So, yeah, you know. And Daniel Mackler says, this is okay. So, he's definitely not the voice of the majority.